Yu Yang and the sun was on the roof of Qingshi village, and the smoke rose. The villagers carried their heads from the fields, and their faces were filled with fatigue and satisfaction after work. Junxi didn't have the heart to admire this quietness. He carried a broken cloth bag and a handful of raw iron lenses in his hand. He secretly trampled over the old locust tree at the entrance of the village and slipped towards the back mountain. Junxi, where are you going? It's almost dark. A crisp sound came from a distance, with some helplessness. Junxi froze and looked back. Xuefeng was standing far away, with both hands on her hips, and her long black hair was slightly blown by the evening wind. She was wearing simple coarse cloth clothes, which could not hide her double-spirited eyes, as if she could see through all Junxi's little thoughts. Hey, Xuefeng, why do you always follow me? I'll go to the back mountain to turn around, there's nothing big. Junxi slammed her back, showed an awkward smile, and tried to get over. Redirect? You won't go home until dark? I think you're going to dig up the pile of broken pieces in your house again. Xuefeng snorted, walked over quickly, and grabbed Junxi's arm. Your father has been missing for 3 years, so can you calm down? Can you dig up those useless things again? When Junxi heard the word dad, her eyes were filled with gloom, but she was soon replaced by stubbornness. He shook Xuefeng's hand and said in a low voice, You don't understand. There must be a trace of what my father left behind. Today I found a new place and said I might find something. If I don't try it, I will not touch it. Xuefeng opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but looking at Junxi's determined eyes, she finally sighed, Okay, I'll go with you. But I'm right, I must come back before dark, otherwise I can tell the village chief. Junxi grinned, revealing her white teeth. As long as you are here, what else can happen? The trees and forests on the back mountain are dense and the air is filled with the scent of moist earth. Junxi took Xuefeng through a thorny thorn and came to a mysterious cave. The grass was growing here, and the entrance of the cave was covered with vines. If Junxi had not discovered it accidentally a few days ago, no one would have noticed this place. Is this the new place you said? Looking at the strange man. Xuefeng stood with eyebrows, holding a wooden stick in her hand, carefully squeezing the vines. Don't be afraid, my father used to say that the real secrets are hidden in the most inconspicuous places. Junxi said one side, and used an iron lens to clear the fog at the opening of the cave. The cave was pitch black, and you could hear the sound of water droplets falling to the ground, and there was an indescribable slightness. The two of them lit a torch and walked in carefully. The stone walls inside the cave were engraved with strange patterns, like some ancient runes, arranged in a crooked manner, exuding an inexplicable sense of pressure. Junxi's eyes lit up. He quickly walked to a stone platform and found an old wooden box on it. The surface of the box was carved with a spiraling giant dragon, which was lifelike. Is this, my father left? Junxi murmured, his hands trembling slightly toward the wooden box. Wait! Don't touch him! Xuefeng grabbed him and warned in a low voice, These things are not simple at first sight, and they may be in danger. What are you afraid of? What my father can keep is definitely not something that hurts me. Junxi gritted her teeth and opened the box. There was a yellow parchment roll lying inside, with the corners of it broken, but the text and pattern on it were still clear and visible. Xuefeng came over and looked at the words on the parchment scroll. This is an ancient ritual record? It reads Bloody Awakens, Dragon sings on the heaven and earth. Junxi, did your ancestors fuck or something? Why did this happen? Junxi shook her head, her eyes brighter and brighter. I don't know, but I always think that this has something to do with my father's misunderstanding. Xuefeng, don't you understand these ancient Chinese? Please take a look. Xuefeng took the parchment roll and started to study it carefully. At this moment, a deep sound of birds suddenly came from the cave, as if something was awakening from the depths of the ground. The runes on the stone wall began to emit a faint blue light, and an invisible pressure filled the air. Junxi, go quickly. There is no match for this place. Xuefeng's face changed and she pulled Junxi out. But they didn't have time to leave. The hole suddenly cracked, and a huge figure rushed out from the underground, carrying a crazy wind. Junxi subconsciously caught Shuefen's head and looked up, and was stunned for a moment. It was a huge flying dragon. Its body is covered with green flakes, each of which is flashing with a faint light. When its wings spread out, it almost covers the sky and the sun, and there is endless majesty and slaughter in its dragon's eyes. What's this? Junxi sallied, his voice whispering. The dragon looked down at him, and let out a low growl, and the sound was rumbling in the cave like thunder. Junxi was stunned, and her brain was blank. Me? I have nothing to do. The ceremonies on the sheepskin roll have been touched. The dragon's eyes locked on Junxi. I am the dragon of the ancient times, named Thunder. Since you woke me up, you made a contract with me. From now on, you are my lord, and I will help you fight the world. Shuefen was stunned by the sound, and pulled Junxi on the sleeve. Did you say something wrong? Why did this dragon think you were the master? Junxi himself was also foggy, but he felt a little confused that there seemed to be a strange force in his body, as if he had some kind of contact with this giant dragon. He took a deep breath and tried to ask, then, did you hear me? The head of the thunder dragon is slightly pointed, and the sound is thunderous. Follow it. At this moment, a sharp roar suddenly came outside the cave, followed by the shock of the villagers. Junxi and Shuefen looked at each other and their faces changed. No! Something happened in the village. The two of them rushed out of the cave and saw only the smoke rolling in the direction of the entrance of the village. Several giant monsters were roaring into the village. They had sharp minions and heavy armored shells. The villagers were not opponents at all and fled in scattered places. Junxi. What's that? Shuefen was shocked, holding the parchment tightly in her hand. How do I know? But I can't let them harm the villagers. Junxi gritted her teeth and turned to look at Lei behind her. Hey, Daoong, can you help me? Lei growled, and his wings suddenly spread out, bringing a crazy look. As you wish. Junxi could only feel a heat flowing from the bottom of her heart, as if connected with the power of thunder. He pointed to the entrance of the village and shouted, Shut! Fuck those monsters! The thunder roared and turned into a green light and rushed towards the village. The huge dragon claws slapped it hard, directly smashing a monster into pieces. The other monsters saw the situation, roared and rushed towards the thunder, but their attacks had no effect in front of the thunder film. A thunder spit out from his mouth, and in an instant, several monster beasts turned into coke. The strong air made the entire village tremble. The villagers watched the scene in amazement, and some even knelt on the ground and murmured, It's the Shenlong. The Shenlong is so powerful. Junxi stood far away, watching thunder show her power, and she was both excited and a little disbelief. He murmured in a low voice, Is this my strength? Shuefen walked to him, patted his shoulder, and his eyes were complicated. Junxi, you are really having fun this time. This dragon is definitely not an ordinary existence. Thunder solved the last monster and flew back to Junxi, with a hint of satisfaction in his dragon's eyes. Lord of the contract, your power is still weak, but your blood potential is unlimited. In the future, you will be able to achieve a stronger existence. Junxi clicked a little. Although she hadn't completely digested it, he knew that from this moment on, his life would never be ordinary again. As night fell, a bonfire was lit in the village. The villagers surrounded Junxi and Shuefen, their eyes filled with awe and gratitude. The village chief walked up to Junxi with a cane and said loudly, Xiaoxi, I didn't expect that your family would have such a secret. If it weren't for you and this Shenlong today, our village would be over. Junxi slapped her head and felt a little embarrassed. Miss Minister, I just knew. I didn't even understand this. Shuefen flipped the parchment roll aside and said with a brow, Junxi, there is a lot of content on this scroll that I haven't finished reading. But there is a paragraph that mentions global trance and blood trance. I suspect that your father's misunderstanding is related to these trances. He may have encountered some trouble while looking for these places. When Junxi heard this, her eyes flashed. You said, my father may still be alive? Shuefen pointed out, Not sure, but it's worth checking. The volume also mentioned that these distant places are scattered around the world, with the power of ancient giants hidden in each place. If you can find them, or maybe you can unlock your father's whereabouts, you can also figure out the secret behind this stance. Junxi clenched her fists tightly, her eyes fixed. Then I have to go. I want to find my father and also figure out what happened to me. Xuefeng smiled and patted his shoulder. Then I'll go with you. You can't handle these ancient Chinese. You can't find any other way without me helping you. Junxi grinned and said, It's true. I'll be relieved if you are here. At this moment, in the forest far away, a pair of cold eyes were quietly observing everything. A man in black robes stood in the dark and said to his subordinates in a low voice, Mr. Tang Wang did not guess wrong. This kid is the inheritor of blood. Tell him and keep an eye on him, so as not to let him harm our plans. The subordinate clicked his head and said in a low voice, Yes, I understand. The number of words in this chapter is about 3,750 words, and the story progress is about 25%. The protagonist uses the first time to drive the dragon to turn the crazy song as a pleasure. Through the interaction between Junxi and Xuefeng, he shows his personality and relationships, and lays a stubborn pen to continue his adventures. The scorching sun in the desert scorched the earth, and the hot waves distorted the air, making the sand dunes far away look like mirages. Junxi wiped the sweat from her head, squinted her eyes and looked away. The sand was everywhere, and she couldn't see anything clearly. He was carrying a water bag on his back, holding a map of Xuefeng in his hand, and his face was full of fatigue. Xuefeng, are you sure this broken map is not wrong? We have been away for 3 days. Why haven't we seen any ancient temple? Junxi couldn't help complaining, his throat was as dry as if it was on fire. Xuefeng walked in front, holding a broken rod in her hand, and said without looking back, Don't bother. This picture was drawn by the ropes on the scroll, so it's absolutely fine. On the scroll, there is an ancient temple deep in the desert, which is the first stance. Just find it, you can wake up a huge beast, and maybe you can find your father's ropes. Junxi sighed and turned to look at the thunder behind her that was spinning in the air. The giant dragon's body flashed with green light under the scorching sun, and its wings fanned slightly, bringing a breeze, making him and Xuefeng feel better. Daolong, why didn't you say there is this place earlier? How could you let me go so far? Lei growled, and his voice was deep. I remember the lack of memory, but I only know that there is no place for you, but I don't know the specific direction. The lore of the contract, only your blood power can truly feel the place of the sage. Okay, I'll find it myself again. Junxi shook his head helplessly and continued to follow Xuefeng. After another half a minute, the two finally discovered a strange scene in the dunes. There were several broken stone pillars exposed on the sand ahead, half buried in the yellow sand, and the pillars were carved with ancient runes, which were somewhat similar to those seen in the cave. Junxi's heart was tightened and ran over quickly, wiped off the sand on the stone pillars with his hands, revealing a clearer carving, a huge silhouette with a whirlwind pattern around him. Xuefeng. This is the ancient temple you call. Junxi shouted excitedly, turning his head to look at her. Xuefeng pointed his head and his eyes lit up. It seems to be right. These runes are consistent with the notes on the scroll, and they should be the entrance to the ceremonial sermon. We have to look for it, the real temple may be buried under the sand. The two began to explore around, and the thunder tilt swirled over the sky, and their dragon eyes looked around, as if they felt something, and let out a low growl. Be careful, there is something strange underground. As the sound fell, the sand under the feet suddenly trembled violently, as if something was surging under the ground. Junxi and Xuefeng quickly retreated, only to see the center of the sand dune collapse suddenly, forming a huge whirlpool. Then an ancient stone door rose from the bottom of the sand, with a roaring giant beast carved on it, majestic. Is this the entrance? Junxi swallowed, feeling her heartbeat a little faster. Xuefeng's eyebrows looked at the runes on the stone door and said in a low voice, There is a warning on the door, saying only the blood selves can enter, and those who rebel will die. Junxi, there may be something wrong with this place, you have to be careful. What are you afraid of? With thunder here, what mechanism can hold me? Junxi patted her chest, tried to cover the tightness in her heart, then walked to the stone door, stretched out her hand and touched the door lightly. Just as his fingers touched the stone door, a burning energy came from the door. Junxi only felt that the blood inside her body seemed to be ignited. A low bird came out of the stone door, slowly opening, revealing a dark passage inside. A faint blue fire lit up on the stone walls on both sides of the passage, illuminating the way forward, and at the same time, the dense carvings on the walls were reflected, as if they were recording an ancient history. "Let's go, don't be stunned." Xuefeng pulled Junxi, and the two walked into the passage one by one, and Lei Yan narrowed his body and turned into a green light and followed Junxi's body. The air in the passage was damp and cold, and the sound of the footsteps was heard in the empty space, making people feel creepy. After walking far away, a huge stone hall appeared in the passage. A sacrificial fortress stood in the center. On the sacrificial fortress was a yellow crystal stone the size of a fist was emitting a faint light. The surrounding stone walls were carved with patterns of countless sandstorms and giant beasts. This crystal should be a ritual thing. Xuefeng approached the fort and observed it carefully. Then he turned his head to Junxi. The scroll said that to wake up the giant beast, you must use the power of blood to activate the ritual thing. Do you try it? Junxi pointed his head, took a deep breath, walked to the fort, and reached out to press his hand on the crystal stone. At this moment, the ground around the sacrificial fort suddenly cracked, and several sharp stone thorns suddenly pierced out and headed straight for Junxi. "Be careful." Xuefeng was shocked and quickly retreated. The thunder growled and the dragon's tail swept, and the stone pierced directly, shattering the stone, and the stone fell on the ground and made a crisp sound. Junxi shivered in surprise, but her hands still didn't leave the crystal stone. He clenched his teeth, closed his eyes, and tried to sense the familiar force in his body. With his attention, the crystal stones emitted increasingly intense light. The mesh around the sacrificial accent seemed to be touched, the ground was shaking constantly, and gravel began to fall from the top of the stone wall, and countless sands flowed into the gap, as if the entire temple was about to collapse. "Junxi! Hurry up! This place is going to collapse!" Xuefeng shouted, his voice full of anxiety. "I'm trying. Don't urge." Junxi was covered in cold sweat. Finally, the next moment, a buzzing sound of the crystal stone burst out with dazzling light, and a violent energy stormed out of the fort, turning into a huge sandstorm, rolling over the entire stone hall. In the sandstorm, a huge beast's will is formed smoothly. Its body is extremely shaped, covered with a golden armored shell, its eyes are as hot as the sun, and its limbs are carrying sand as it steps on the ground, as if the entire desert is under its control. It made a roar that was thunderous, and the sound exploded like thunder, shaking the walls of the stone hall began to crack. "The lord of the contract, I, the king of the sandstorm, will call you to come." The giant beast looked down at Junxi, and his voice was so powerful that it was powerful. "From now on, my power will be used by you." Junxi opened her eyes quietly and looked at the giant beast in front of her, her heart was shocked and excited. He could feel that the power in his body increased a little more, as if it was blended with Mohu's energy. He grinned and said, "What a guy, with you here, who dares to swear me?" Xuefeng relaxed her voice and walked over and patted his shoulder. "Don't be complacent, we have to leave this place first, this temple is about to collapse." But just as the two were about to evacuate, a sudden burst of stomping sound came from the entrance of the stone hall. Then more than 10 men in black robe rushed in. A man in the lead looked at Junxi with a sneer, holding a long knife in his hand, with a strange rune engraved on the blade, emitting an ominous breath. "The inheritor of the blood womb, it's you." The man snorted coldly, his eyes swept over Mohu and Lei, and a greedy flashed in his eyes. Mr. Tang Long said it's right. As long as you catch you, these huge beasts will belong to us. Brothers, go ahead. Don't let this kid run away. Junxi's face darkened and she clenched her fists tightly. "It's you who helps you again. I didn't clean up in the village last time, so how dare you come here?" Xuefeng pulled his sleeve and said in a low voice, Junxi, don't move. They are many people, so we have to find a way to take it off. Take it off? No need. Junxi sneered and turned to look at Mo Hu and Lei. Daolong, Sand King, come to me. Let this helper know who is the master of this. Thunder growled, spread its wings, turning into a blue light and slamming towards the man in black. The dragon claw swung wildly, and directly patted several people. Mo roared, and his huge body trembled violently. The surrounding sand instantly condensed into a sandstorm, rolling towards the enemy. Wherever the sandstorm passed, the man in black robe was rolled into it, and his voice was not completely intimate, and he had no chance to resist. The man in the head saw that the action was not good, so he gritted his teeth and lifted the long knife. The runes on the blade lit up, and he tried to resist the sandstorm. But Mo Roar's eyes suddenly glared, and a golden light shot out from his eyes, hitting the long knife in the man's hand. The blade had a click sound and broke. The man himself was swallowed by the sandstorm and threw a mouthful of blood on the stone wall. Retreat! Retreat! The man roared, and with his beloved subordinates stumbled out of the stone hall and disappeared into the entrance. Junxi looked at their wolfish backs and couldn't help but hum, that's all, do you want to kill my things? Make a dream. Xuefeng was not that happy, she said with a brow, Junxi, don't underestimate them. These people are just Tang Long's subordinates, and the real trouble is still behind. It is absolutely not easy for Tang Long to cultivate such a group. Junxi clicked his head, turned his head and looked at Mo Luo, and patted its shell. No matter what, I'm not afraid of having you here. Let's go, let's get out of this ghost place first. Mo roared lowly, and his huge body trembled. The sandstorm rolled up again, directly rolling the gravel at the top of the stone hall, revealing a passage leading to the ground. Under the protection of Lei, Junxi and Xuefeng successfully escaped from the temple and returned to the scorching sun in the desert. As night fell, the temperature in the desert dropped, the cold wind blew, Junxi and Xuefeng sat by a bonfire, Lei and Mo Luo were guarding the distance, and their huge bodies covered the sand for them. Xuefeng held the parchment roll and continued to study the content of the wall paintings recorded from the temple under the flames, and her face became more and more solemn. Junxi, these wall paintings are not very opposite. Xuefeng finally opened her mouth with a low voice. The wall paintings are recorded. The ancient ritual is not just to awaken the giant beast, but also has a larger purpose, the seal gate. It is said that this door leads to another world, and once opened, it will bring disaster to death. Junxi was stunned and her eyebrows were tightly brows. What do you mean? Isn't the ritual used to enhance strength? Why is it related to Huan? Xuefeng slammed the head, pointing to a pattern on the wall, a huge black shadow that was stretched out by a chain, with countless giant beasts surrounding it. I'm not sure, but the wall says that giant beasts are guardians, and their power is used to press the door. And your blood seems to be the only key to start the stance and control the giant beasts. The problem is that someone wants to use this to break the seal. Junxi's heart was tightened, and a sneer from Tang Long's subordinate appeared in the sea of his brain. Are you saying that Tang Long, who wants to open this door? It's very likely. Xuefeng continued, more importantly, a name mentioned on the wall painting, Yun. I doubt that this is your father's name. He may have discovered this slander for a long time, so he searched for the picture to stop it. Junxi heard the name Yuner and suddenly stood up, her eyes filled with excitement. Are you sure? Then my father is missing, and he will definitely not be able to get involved in this matter. Xuefeng, we have to continue to find the next disaster. I want to find the truth. Xuefeng smiled and patted his shoulder. Don't worry, I will help you. But you have to remember that Tang Long's organization will not let us go easily. Next, be careful with every step. Junxi pointed his head, clenched his fists, and looked at the far side with a firm look. No matter how strong they are, I will not retreat. I want to find my father, and I must stop their plans. The bonfire light shone on Junxi's face, reflecting the determination in his eyes. Lei and Mo Roar growled, as if responding to his will. In the desert night, the wind and sand gradually calmed down, but the greater storm was quietly curling away. Behind the sand dunes far away, a man in black robe was watching all this quietly, and the communication device in his hand emitted a low bird. He said in a low voice, "Sir, Junxi has woken up the second giant and has greatly increased its strength. Do we need to set up the next position in advance?" On the other end of the communication device, a cold voice came, "Don't hurry, let him grow longer. The stronger the blood force, the easier it will be for the seal to open. Tell everyone, keep an eye on him, but don't be shocked." "Yes, sir." The man in black robe closed the communication device, turned around and disappeared into the night, leaving only a stream of silences scattered. "Junxi, your road is still long." The number of words in this chapter is about 3,800 words, and the story progress is about 50%. It is enjoyable to wake up the new giant roar and retreat from Tang Wang's subordinates. At the same time, it reveals the greater rumor behind the ceremonial through Xuefen's interpretation of the wall, laying a slight dialect for the subsequent plot, and maintaining the fluidity and thoughts of the story. The sea breeze came over with the smell of fishy smell. Junxi stood on a broken small boat, holding the side of the boat with his hands, looking at the deep and invisible ocean below. His face turned pale. The hull was undulating with the waves, and his stomach was so surging that he couldn't help but mutter, "Xuefen, do we really have to jump down? This sea doesn't look right. How do I feel my heart is getting wet?" Xuefen stood beside him, holding a parchment in his hand, staring at the sea with his eyes focused on the surface, and said without looking back, "Don't worry, the scroll is clearly written on it. The second staircase is deep in this sea area, called the Shing of the Pure Sea. There is a huge beast that controls the power of the ocean. As long as you wake it up, your power will be able to go to the next floor, and you may also find your father's rope." Junxi slapped his head, looked at the thunder that was spinning in the air and Mo roar lying on the stern of the boat. Both giant beasts looked alert, and they obviously felt the abnormality at the bottom of the sea. He sniffed and gritted his teeth and said, "Okay, jump if you jump. At worst, you can be eaten by fish, and you can't let that guy Tang Wang take the lead." Xuefan rolled her eyes, took out 2 simple diving equipment from her bag, and threw it to Junxi. "Don't worry, this is given by the old villagers in the village, which can make us stay under the water for a little longer. Remember, there may be guardians in the Pure Sea Temple. Don't come and keep me in touch after going down." Junxi took the equipment and put it awkwardly, but couldn't help but mutter, "Why are you always my 3-year-old? I'm not brainless." But when he put on the diving lens and looked down at the deep blue sea water, his heart still felt bulging. Thunder growled, and the sound came out in Junxi's brain, "The lore of the contract, the power of the sea is not good at me and Mo Luo. We cannot go deeper with you, and we can only guard the sea. If there is any danger, quickly summon us with the power of blood." Junxi clicked her head and patted her chest. "Don't worry, I can handle it." After saying that, he took a deep breath and jumped into the sea. The cold sea water instantly wrapped around his body, and the biting chill made him tremble. Xuefan then tightened. With the help of diving equipment, the light around him became darker and darker, and only the sound of bubbles and his rapid heartbeat were left in his ears. The world under the sea is different and peaceful. Occasionally, a few silver-colored fish traveled, and the pieces flashed coldly under the faint light. Junxi held the short knife in her hand tightly, and looked around her eyes, afraid that some monster would suddenly appear. Xuefan held a stone slab with map symbols engraved from a sheepskin roll. From time to time, she tried to find the escape entrance according to the surrounding terrain. After about half a time of diving, the two finally discovered an unusual area at the bottom of the sea. In front of it is a huge sea, and the bottom can be seen about the silhouette of a broken temple. The stone pillars of the temple are covered with seaweed and shells, emitting a faint green light, as if some ancient energy is flowing. "That's it." Xuefan compared a hand, pointed to the direction of the temple, with an excited look in her eyes. Junxi pointed his head and felt a little uneasy. He could feel the blood force in his body began to get impatient as he approached the temple, as if he was attracted by something. The two swam carefully toward the entrance of the temple. As soon as they approached, a strong current of water suddenly burst out from the temple, almost rolling them away. "Be careful!" Xuefan shouted softly, grabbing the stone pillar next to him and calmed down. Junxi bit her teeth tightly and held a piece of rock with both hands, barely not being wiped away. He looked up and saw a huge guardian creature floating around the entrance of the temple, a sea monster with a large body shape, with more than a dozen touching hands, each touching hands filled with sharp suction plates, and the huge eyes radiated the ape-red light, staring at them as if staring at a basketball. "What is this thing?" Junxi shivered in surprise, and the short knife in her hand could hardly hold it. Xuefan's face turned pale and said in a low voice, "This should be the guardian of the Temple of the Pure Sea. It is mentioned on the scroll. You must pass the test before waking up the giant beast. Junxi, we have to find a way to go over it, or, fuck it. Boil? It's locked us, how can we do it?" Junxi gritted her teeth and her brain moved quickly. The sea monster's touch was already rushing towards them, at a staggering speed, and the water flow brought by people almost couldn't move. He suddenly turned to the side, avoided a touching attack, and then shouted, "Xuefan, find a chance to enter the temple, this guy will hand it over to me." "You're crazy. Why did you beat it?" Xuefan stomped her feet in a hurry, but Junxi had already swept up and could only grit her teeth and swim towards the entrance of the temple, trying to find something in the stylistic way. Junxi held the short sword. Although she knew that she was not the opponent of this monster at all, a stubbornness ignited in her heart. He growled lowly, trying to tune the blood force in his body. Although he could not summon thunder and roar under the water, he could feel a force connected to the ocean awakening. He closed his eyes, focused his mind, and tried to establish a connection with this force. The sea monster didn't give him a chance to breathe. Several more touching hands came at the same time. Junxi reluctantly avoided a blow, but was hit hard by another touching hand. The oxygen tube of the diving equipment was instantly pulled off. He blew a mouthful of sea water, and his chest felt as if it was burned by fire. "Junxi." Xuefan looked back and her face changed drastically. She hurriedly swam back from the entrance of the temple, holding a piece of luminous blue crystal in her hand. "I have found the genre, activate it quickly." Junxi coughed and took the crystal, unable to see the pain in her chest. She held the crystal tightly with both hands and tried to wake up the power in it. The crystal stone emitted a faint light, but the sea monster seemed to have noticed something, and made a sharp roar, and his touching hand rushed towards Junxi, faster than before. "It's too late." Junxi gritted his teeth and suddenly raised the crystal stone. The blood force in his body exploded instantly, and it was co-starred with the energy of the crystal stone. The sea water around the temple began to storm violently, forming a huge whirlpool. In the center of the whirlpool, a giant beast that was no bigger than the dragon appeared slowly. It was a giant whale, with a large body covering the sky and the sun. The blue body was filled with ancient runes, and each piece was flashing with deep light. Its mouth sounded a low bird, and the sound swept across the entire sea like a sea, making the sea monster's touch stiff in an instant, and he didn't dare to move. "The lord of the contract, the lord of the sea, Blue, should you call me?" The giant whale's voice was low and remote, as if it was coming from the deepest part of the sea. "My power will hear your order." Junxi opened her eyes quietly, looking at the giant wreck in front of her. Her chest was undulating violently, and she couldn't help but grin. "What a guy, with you here, what's this sea monster?" The blue eyes narrowed slightly, and the huge body moved slightly. The surrounding sea water instantly condensed into countless sharp water blades, heading straight for the sea monster. The sea monster let out a roar, and the touching hands slammed and danced to the test, but the power of the water blade was far beyond its tolerance range. The touching hand was cut one by one, and the ape's blood spread in the sea water. In the blink of an eye, it was torn to pieces by the water blade, turning into a group of minced meat and sank into the bottom of the sea. Xuefan swam to Junxi and relaxed her voice. "You guy, you will definitely get one life back. However, the power of blue is so terrifying." Junxi pointed his head and just wanted to say something, but suddenly felt a pain in her chest. the place where the sea monster was just sucked, as if several ribs had been broken, and the pain made him suck. He forced his hand to snatch it. It's okay, let's go back to the sea first, this place should not stay for a long time. The blue light sounded low, and the huge body held up Junxi and Xuefan, turning into a blue light and rushing towards the sea. The sea water automatically split around it, and it was amazingly fast, and in the blink of an eye they were brought back to the small boat. Lei and Mo roared to meet him, and stood on Junxi's side. Junxi lay on the board, gasping heavily, and the pain in her chest made his face pale. Xuefan quickly took out some herbs from his bag, handled his wounds simply, and complained in a low voice, "Why are you so moved? You're almost dead, do you know?" Junxi grinned, her voice weak, "What if you don't move? You can't just keep your head on. Besides, isn't Bluebird here? Let's win." Xuefan hummed, and said nothing more. She turned her head and looked towards the temple, took out a stone slab full of runes from it, and said with a brow, "I also found this in the temple, with some genres engraved on it. I translated part of it and found that Tang Long's plan was more terrifying than we thought." Junxi sat up nervously and gritted her teeth and asked, "What's going on? Tell me clearly." Xuefan took a deep breath and his voice was low. "On the stone slab, the ultimate goal of the far ancient style is not to simply awaken the giant beast, but to open the sealed door. Behind this door, it is said to be another world full of power of destruction. Once opened, our world balance will be broken and all life will be swallowed up. And Tang Long, he wants to use your blood power to complete the final style and become the controller of the new world." When Junxi heard this, her pupils shrank, and her fists clenched and she chuckled, "This guy is so crazy. Aren't he afraid that he would finish the game? He may have some means to survive the destruction." Xuefan continued, "More importantly, a person mentioned on the stone slab, Yun. I suspect that your father discovered this trance that year, so he only looked for a trance to try to stop Tang Long. But he was probably caught by Tang Long when he was in the last trance." Junxi's eyes flashed with pain and anger, and she said in a low voice, "Then is my father still possible to live?" Xuefan pointed the head and said, "It's possible. So, Junxi, we have to find the last place before Tang Long, stop his plan, and save your father." Junxi gritted her teeth. Although the wound was still hurting, his eyes were full of determination. "Okay, no matter how difficult it is, I will try it. I will never let him succeed, like Tang Long." At this moment, a huge wave suddenly broke out on the sea surface, and the boat swayed violently. Junxi and Xuefan looked up and saw a huge black ship breaking through the waves on the sea far away. A man in a black robe stood on the head of the ship, his temper was cold and his eyes were locked on Junxi like a knife. Behind him, dozens of black-robed men stood all the time, with their weapons emitting strange light. "Tang Long." Junxi growled, reluctantly stood up, and the blood in her body ignited again. Tang Long sneered, and the sound came across the sea, carrying endless ridicule. "Bloody inheritor, I didn't expect you to be able to go this far, even the blue sky was awakened by you. However, your path has ended here. If you hand over the power of the huge beast, I may be able to save your life. Be a dream." Junxi gritted her teeth and turned to look at Blue Jay, Lei and Mo roar, "Brothers, come on to me. Let this guy know who is the master of this." At the same time, the three giant beasts roared and thunder turned into a green light and rushed towards the black ship. The dragon claws swung wildly. With a low roar, the power of the sandstorm condensed on the sea surface, turning into sand blades and heading straight for the enemy. The blue skull plunged into the bottom of the sea, and the huge body ripped up huge waves and directly hit the black ship. Tang Long snorted coldly, and a long staff in his hand slapped, and a black energy barrier instantly opened, barely holding the three giant beasts to attack. The subordinates behind him also took action. The weapons in his hand emitted a strange light, colliding with the power of the giant beast head-on. The sea surface was instantly torn apart by energy, and countless water columns were raised. "Junxi, although your giant beast is strong, you are too weak." Tang Long sneered, pointing his long stick at Junxi, and a black light shot straight into it, so fast that it was impossible to react. Junxi gritted her teeth and wanted to hide, but the injury dragged his movements. He forced his side to strengthen his body, but was still hit by the black light, and the blood instantly dyed half of his body. He hummed and knelt on the board with his knees, sweating from the pain. Junxi. Xuefeng was shocked and hurriedly supported him, his eyes full of anxiety. Tang Long saw this, and his eyes were filled with pride. The long stick rose again, another hit, and you will be finished. But at this moment, the blue slam suddenly rushed out from the bottom of the sea, and the huge body directly hit the black ship. The hull was instantly knocked down. Tang Long stumbled and the attack was forced to break. He roared angrily and turned to look at Blue Jay. You should die a beast, seek death. The blue and low bird sounded, and the sea water condensed into a huge water dragon around it, heading straight for Tang Long Lei and Mo, who also took advantage of the opportunity to attack. The power of the three giants made Tang Long's barrier cracks begin to appear, and his subordinates were even beaten by the huge waves and sandstorms, and their voices were endless. How ugly! This kid's huge beast power is really tricky. Tang Long gritted his teeth and finally realized that he would not be able to get better if he continued to fight. He snorted coldly, his long staff suddenly slapped, and a black fog covered the black ship. The hull quickly retreated and disappeared at sea level, leaving only a cold word, Junxi, I have remembered this account. At the end of the ceremony, I will make you regret your choice today. Junxi looked at Tang Long's far-off back and finally relaxed his voice. However, his eyes turned dark because of excessive blood loss and he passed by a little while. Xuefeng hurriedly held him and said in a low voice, Don't be stubborn, we have to find a place to rest and deal with your injuries. The blue and low voice sounded, and the huge body held up the boat and drove towards the nearest island. Lu Lei and Mo, who were guarding both sides, vigilantly watching the surrounding area to prevent Tang Long from leaving and returning. As night fell, the boat was docked next to an inhabited island filled with lush coconut trees and a bonfire was lit on the sand. Junxi was lying on the sand beach, and the wound on her shoulders and chest had been simply wrapped by Xuefeng, but his face was still white and his breathing was a little rapid. Xuefeng sat beside him, holding the stone slabs brought from the temple in his hand, and continued to study the runes on it with the flames, with her eyebrows tightly locked. After a while, she finally opened her mouth, Junxi, I have read some of the contents again. The slab says that the end is located at the body of the sky, which is the core of all ceremonies. If Tang Long completes the ceremonies there, the sealed door will be opened. Junxi gritted her teeth and said in a low voice, Then we have to go there in front of him. No matter what, I will stop him. Xuefeng pointed his head, and a flickered in his eyes, but your current injury? It's okay, just take a few days off. Junxi smiled strongly, and turned to look at the blue slanting on the sea, as well as the thunder and Mo roar who were standing far away. With them here, it's not that easy for Tang Long to move me. Xuefeng sighed and said nothing, but said in a low voice, Then you have a good rest, the next road will only be more difficult. Junxi pointed his head, looking at the sea level far away, his eyes full of determination. He knew that Tang Long's threat was not over, and his father's whereabouts and the fate of the world all pressed on his shoulders. No matter how difficult it is, he must continue. The sea breeze was blowing, and the bonfire light shone on Junxi's face, reflecting the determination and fatigue in his eyes. In the night far away, the blue silence sounded like a response to his will, and the greater storm was quietly curling away. The number of words in this chapter is about 3,750 words, and the story progress is about 75%. Through Junxi's awakening of blue light and confrontation with Tang Long, the pleasure and climax of the show, and the climax of the story is revealed through Xuefeng's interpretation of the stone slab, sheds the sacred traces of the final battle and keeps the story flowing in thoughts. The sea storm gradually calmed down, and the bonfire on the island was burning, leaving only a long stream of smoke scattered. Junxi's injuries changed a little after several days of rest. Although his shoulders and chest were still hurt, the struggle in his eyes was not reduced at all. He stood on the beach, looked at the vague clouds far away, clenched his fists and said in a low voice, The turbulence of the sky. I'm here. Xuefeng packed her bags, walked over and patted him on the shoulder, holding the stone slab brought from the Temple of the Pure Sea, and spoke in a definite manner. According to the notes on the stone slab, the wave of the sky is the core of all straits, and is located on the cloud level at the highest peak of the world. Tang Long must have arranged everything there. We have to move quickly and cannot let him complete the final strait. Junxi nodded, turned his head to look at Lan Yuan, San Lei, and Mo Ho circling on the sea surface. The three giant beasts growled lowly once, as if sensing his determination. They all approached. San Lei's deep voice rang in Junxi's mind. Contract Master, the energy at the pinnacle of the sky is extremely powerful. We will do our best to help you, but in the final battle, victory or defeat is still in your hands. Don't worry, I won't disappoint you. Junxi grinned, then looked at Lan Yuan. Big whale, can you take us flying to that place? Lan Yuan let out a low hum. Its huge body slowly emerged from the sea surface. Seawater condensed into a gentle water mist around it, lifting Junxi and Xuefeng. San Lei and Mo Ho guarded on both sides respectively. The three giant beasts joined forces, turning into a stream of light rushing towards the sky, heading straight for the direction of the pinnacle of the sky. Passing through layers of clouds and mist, the cold wind scraped like a knife. Junxi and Xuefeng wrapped tightly in their coarse clothes, their cheeks frozen red. As the altitude climbed, the air became thinner and thinner. In the distant cloud layers, a faintly visible ancient altar floating, the altar composed of countless floating stones, surrounded by flickering thunder and strong winds, emitting energy fluctuations that made one's heart palpitate. That is the pinnacle of the sky. Xuefeng murmured in a low voice, her eyes full of shock. This place simply doesn't seem like it can exist in the human world. Junxi narrowed his eyes. The bloodline power in his body began to surge violently as he approached the altar, as if being pulled by some force. He gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, no matter what, this is the final battle. Tang Long, I must settle accounts with you today. Lan Yuan slowly placed them on a floating stone at the edge of the altar. The three giant beasts circled around, vigilantly watching the center of the altar. In the center of the altar, a huge stone gate stood, engraved with strange runes on the door, emitting thick black mist. In front of the door stood a familiar figure, Tang Long. He wore a black robe, held a long staff, the top of the staff inlaid with a crimson gem, emitting an ominous light. Behind him, dozens of black-robed subordinates stood neatly, each holding a weapon engraved with runes, with a menacing aura. Bloodline inheritor, you really came. Tang Long turned around, his cold gaze locked on Junxi. A mocking smile curled at the corner of his mouth. I thought you would be dealt with by my subordinates on the way. Didn't expect you could really reach this step. However, that's good. The stronger your bloodline power, the easier it is to open the sealing gate. Junxi snorted coldly, clenched his fist. Tang Long, stop talking nonsense. I've seen through your conspiracy long ago. I'm here today to stop you. What's the benefit of opening that broken door? If the world is destroyed, you won't survive either. Tang Long laughed heartily, a hint of madness flashed in his eyes. Destruction? No, kid, you don't understand. The world behind the sealing gate has endless power. As long as I control it, I can become the master of the new world. And you are just a pawn in my plan. Pawn? I think you're daydreaming. Junxi gritted his teeth, turned his head to look at Xuefeng. Xuefeng, how to handle the ceremony? We have to quickly awaken the last giant beast, can't let him make the first move. Xuefeng nodded. Junxi gritted his teeth, taking advantage of the gap when the giant beast attracted the firepower, quickly rushed to the center of the altar. The core of the ceremony was a huge floating stone, with the surface engraved with complex runes, emitting a faint white light. He stretched out his hand, pressed it on the stone surface. The bloodline power in his body instantly surged out, resonating with the runes, and the entire altar began to shake violently, as if some sleeping power was awakening. Want to awaken the supreme giant beast? Dream on! Tang Long roared, pointing his staff at Junxi. A crimson light shot straight towards him, so fast that one could not react. Junxi's heart tightened. He barely dodged to the side, but still got grazed on the arm by the light. Fresh blood instantly stained his sleeve red. He grunted in pain, gritted his teeth and persisted. pressing both hands firmly on the floating stone, roaring lowly, "Come on. No matter what you are, I must call you out today." The light of the floating stone grew increasingly bright. Suddenly a huge spatial rift cracked open above the altar. A thunderous roar came from the rift, followed by an extremely massive giant beast slowly descending. Its body seemed to be composed of stars and clouds, its wings spread out to cover the sky and block the sun, every feather shimmering with golden light, its eyes revealing endless majesty and ancientness. Just upon appearing, the entire altar's energy field was completely suppressed. "The master of the contract, I, the lord of the sky Xingyu, respond to your summons." The giant beast's voice echoed like thunder on the altar. "My power listens to your command." Junxi opened his eyes, looking at the Xingyu in front of him, his chest heaving violently, yet he couldn't help but grin. "Good fellow, with you here, I see who dares to challenge me." Tang Wang saw this, his face finally turned ugly, he gritted his teeth and growled lowly, "The supreme giant beast, indeed awakened by you. But, even if you have 4 giant beasts, what of it? My ceremony has already completed half, the sealed door is about to open." As he spoke, he suddenly thrust the staff into the altar ground. The crimson gem at the top of the staff burst with dazzling light, the black mist on the stone door quickly condensed, turning into a massive vortex. From the vortex came waves of low hums, like some terrifying existence approaching. The floating stones around the altar began to collapse, the thunder and fierce winds became even more violent, as if the peak of the sky was about to be torn apart. "Junxi! Stop him! If the door opens, it's over!" Xuefan shouted, her voice full of anxiety, while using her dagger to fend off the black-robed people nearby, trying to approach Junxi. Junxi gritted his teeth, turned his head to look at the 4 giant beasts. "Brothers, go for me! Smash that broken door for me!" Xingyu let out a low roar, suddenly flapped its wings, countless golden light feathers turned into sharp arrows, shooting straight towards the stone door. Sun Lei turned into a green light, its dragon claws swinging to cause thunder to explode, fiercely bombarding the vortex. Mo Ho condensed a sandstorm, turning it into a massive sand dragon whirlwind, trying to tear apart the black mist. Lan Yuan summoned towering waves, the water currents condensing into icebergs in the air, directly smashing towards Tang Wang. "You harmed my father and so many people. Today I will fight with you." Junxi growled, and the last force in his body poured out. The energy of the 4 giant beasts gathered on him at the same time. His hands burst out with dazzling white light, and he pulled it hard. The stone was pulled off with a click sound, and then he smashed it hard to the ground, turning into countless pieces. "No!" Tang Wang let out a ruthless roar, and the black fog on the stone door instantly collapsed. The vortex quickly shrank, and finally disappeared. The energy of the stylistic suffocated backwards. Tang Wang was hit by an invisible force and fell hard on the edge of the sacrificial supreme, spitting out a mouthful of blood, and his face turned white as paper. Junxi also knelt on her knees because of the exhaustion, gasping heavily, and her body was shaking. Xuefan hurriedly ran over to support him, and a crying voice was in his voice. "Junxi, are you okay? Don't scare me." "It's okay, it's just a little tired." Junxi grinned, her voice weak, but her eyes were full of clarity. "The door has not opened, we win." The 4 giant beasts growled and stood on Junxi's side. Xingyu's voice roared in the air, "Lord of the contract, you have kept the balance of the world. Our power is worthy of you." Tang Wang stood up with a stinging heart, his eyes filled with resentment. "Junxi, do you think this is over? Although my plan is not bad, don't think about it. You will never know Yun's whereabouts." "What are you talking about?" Junxi raised her head suddenly, and anger arose in her eyes. "Where's my father? Say." Tang Wang sneered, but stopped talking, and suddenly took out a piece of black crystal from it and crushed it hard. Then his body was wrapped in a group of black fogs, and disappeared on the fort in the blink of an eye, leaving only a whisper, "Blood Inheritor, we will have a period of time in the future." "Tang Wang!" Junxi roared angrily, trying to catch up, but his body could no longer hold back. His eyes turned dark and he fell to Xuefan. After a while, Junxi opened her eyes quietly and found that she was lying on a pumice stone on the edge of the fort, with Xuefin's coat on her body, and her wounds had been simply wrapped. The 4 giant beasts guarded the distance, the thunder and the wind on the fort have subsided, the sun penetrated the clouds, bringing a warmth to this ancient shore. Junxi, you're awake. Xuefin saw his slight eyes, relaxed his breath, and his eyes were a little red. You just scared me to death. I haven't calmed down for the past half day. Hey, am I fine? Junxi smiled hard, sat up, and suddenly noticed a faint light on the floating stone in the center of the sacrificial. His heart was tense. He walked over and said in a low voice, "What is this?" Xuefin came over and looked at it. When she saw a brow, she found an image on the surface of the floating stone. The image was a middle-aged man with a look similar to Junxi, and her eyes were full of determination and sang. He spoke with a low voice and familiarity, "Xiaoxi, if you are reading this message, you have come to the turret of the sky and completed the final trial. I am Yun, your father." Junxi heard this sound, her pupils suddenly shrank, and her body was trembling. "Dad, it's really you." Yun Wang in the image continued, "I discovered Tang Wang's tragedy that year. He tried to open the sealed door and bring the destruction. I looked around and tried to stop him, but in the last battle, I was seriously injured by him and could not meet you again. But I will trust all my hopes on you, because you are the last blood inheritor of our family. Only you can wake up the giant beast and protect the world." Junxi bit her lips tightly, her eyes were red, and she murmured, "Dad, why haven't you come back? I've been looking for you for so long." Yun's image smiled slightly, his eyes filled with relief. "Xiaoxi, I know you have suffered a lot, but you have done it. You have defended the world and the mission of our family. My blood power has been exhausted and I cannot come back, but I will always look at you. Remember, you are not only the inheritor, but also the guardian. The future of this world will be handed over to you." The image gradually blurred, and finally turned into a ray of light dissipated into the air. Junxi stood there blankly, and the Rhine water slid down her face, without crying. He clenched his fists tightly and said in a low voice, "Dad, I understand. I will keep all this well and will not disappoint you." Xuefin stood behind him and patted his shoulder lightly, with a gentle voice, "Junxi, your father must be very proud. You are not alone, you are me, and these giant beasts, let's carry them together." Junxi turned her head and looked at her, grinned, wiped her eyes. "Hey, that's right. Why would I be alone with you?" The 4 giant beasts growled, as if responding to his words. Xingyu's voice echoed in the air, "The lore of the contract, we will always guard you, and the balance of the world will be dominated by you." Junxi pointed his head, his eyes swept over the fort, over the clouds, over the sky farther away, and there was a sense of peace that had never been seen in his eyes. He knew that he was no longer the confused boy. From the moment he woke up the thunder from the cave, the responsibility on his shoulders was determined to be unable to be removed. And the hardships, battles and growth along the way also made him understand the meaning of responsibility. "Xuefin, let's go home." Junxi turned around, with a burst of fatigue in her voice, and she also felt a sense of sensation. "The people in the village are waiting for us." Xuefin smiled and pointed, "Okay, go home." The blue ginger sounded, and the huge body held up 2 people. Thunder, Mohu and Xingyu were guarding the surrounding area. The 4 giant beasts turned into a stream of light, passing through the cloud layer, and flying towards the direction of Qingshi village. Yang Guangming reflects Junxi's definite face on them, and also reflects the peace and hope of this world. The number of words in this chapter is about 3,800 words, and the story progresses by 100%. Through the historical battle between Junxi and Tang Long, the awakening of the giant star feather, the peak of power and pleasure are displayed. After the battle, the father's message revealed the family secrets, completed the protagonist's wishes, and through the interaction with Xuefin and interchanges, he showed his growth from a confused boy to a guardian. The story is over and over, giving readers a deep sense of satisfaction.